Rocking the Journey, the podcast for inspirational women who dance to a different tune. Now, today, in our series of conversations with our inspirational women in our community, I'm joined by Jane Midwinter. Now, Jane used to be a teacher, and now she has moved on to coaching women, helping them to find their voice, and also focusing on the issues around menopause, particularly in the workplace. So welcome, Jane.
Hello, Debbie. Thank you very much for having me.
So we had a focus group last night, and a lot of our women that we had there were saying they're really keen when we have a guest to find out the kind of backstory of how people got to where they are, and those real life issues, the kind of issues that we're all facing on a daily basis. So start by telling me, how did it all start out?
Okay, so I went into teaching. I always wanted to be a teacher, and I went into teaching later in my life, and started off in secondary education, actually. I enjoyed it, but I have a real passion for music and art, and a love of English and learning, and was very interested in how young children how they learned, how they started to read, and so I went into primary eventually after I had my own family, and absolutely loved it. It was a complete and utter privilege. Worked in lots of different primary schools, became a music leader, ran choirs and school bands, and had a lot of fun. It was very hard work, but I enjoyed it. And then I went into leadership and became a deputy head of an infant school, large infant school, and eventually became a head. And my last role was as an advisory head. Actually, it wasn't my last role. That was my penultimate role, was an advisory head, working in schools across the county. And then my very last role, which was going to be my sort of swan song, was opening a primary phase, a primary school within an academy. It was really exciting. Every head teacher's dream, I think, opening your own school, creating your own curriculum, and recruiting your staff. So it was a really exciting time. 2 months after we opened, Peter, my husband, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. And so that was a huge change for me. 34 years of teaching and education, that's all I knew. I'd always worked through having my children, took maternity leave, short maternity leave. Just that's all I knew. And then suddenly Peter was diagnosed and was very ill for quite a long time.
So can you because I think a lot of our listeners will relate to this, that you're suddenly kind of bobbling along, life's going exactly as scripted, exactly how you wanted it, and then suddenly something major like this happens, really shakes the earth underneath you. So tell us, what did it feel like? What were the issues that came up for you?
It was a very strange time. I was I'm very resilient, and I think that at first it was right, we're going to get through this. Well, it was always like that. That was the mantra: all will be well. We'll get through this time. And I think it was just such a shock. You don't think it's going to happen to you, do you? And I think Peter was 6'2", big chap, played rugby, PE teacher, now a head teacher, and we'd always eaten healthily, we'd lived a healthy life, we just, I don't know, perhaps stupidly you think that it's not going to happen to you, and it did, and it was such a shock. But we thought, well, I can carry on with what I'm doing. Peter had treatment every day, and he had chemo on a Monday, and then radio every day after that, and we had to travel for that treatment. So we had friends and family who stepped in and said that they would take him, and I would take him on the Monday, and they would step in and do the other. So it was a shared kind of time. And friends, a lot of my family sort of moved in for a while, got moved in and out, supporting, which was lovely because I couldn't be there all the time. So I was trying to open this new school, and all the challenges that brought. And then I had, Peter to think about as well. And I can remember a turning point for me was we were in the hospital one day and he was having his chemo and he passed out. And, you know, I mean, it's something that I've never seen Peter do. I've never seen him in that vulnerable situation. And I actually found myself sitting there looking at my watch thinking, gosh, you know, how long is this going to set us back? I'm going to go back to school. And I think the nurse just looked at me aghast. And
so Jane, that's so interesting. Why was that? Because you were so immersed in your professional life that you almost kind of couldn't see anything else at that point?
So I always throw myself into a project and into anything that I do. Opening a school was a huge, opening this phase of the academy was a huge job. And you know,
and a really important job as well.
A really important
kids
job.
Relying on you.
Absolutely. And we'd opened this, you know, we've been planning since April. This was now sort of September, November. It was actually on my birthday that he told me he'd gone through cancer. You can't change your birthday, can you? And I think I was so immersed.
Were you in denial though? Were you, you know, when you kind of, because I mean, having experienced the cancer journey with my loved ones before, I think sometimes you just don't quite get it. First of all, you think, oh no, that they'll have it and it will get better and it'll be fine. And sometimes those horrible things of seeing somebody's real vulnerability is just such as you almost keep it shut out. Is that?
Yes. You don't want to perhaps. It's funny how the brain works, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you think, well, you know, it almost compartmentalizing things.
Yeah.
So, well, Peter can go away and do that, and I can do this, and then it'll all be fine. And moving forward. So I think there was an element of that, perhaps not wanting to admit that this was happening.
Yeah.
And I also did feel I had this huge responsibility to all these children and their families and the staff and the team, and it was very inconvenient.
I really understand. I mean, that could sound quite difficult for people listening, couldn't it? But I do understand that. And I mean, from sitting here, how long ago was this now?
So Peter's now 4.5 years clear.
Right.
So
when you look back, do you kind of recognize yourself, or did you think, oh my God, what was going on then?
Oh, I don't know. I did. I think that conversation I had with that nurse was really important when I had that sort of moment of that choice. You know, we all have choice points, don't we? And I had that choice of actually kind of, you know, come on, Peter, we've got to get on with this and getting back to work, or actually saying, I think my role is changing for a little while. And so I made that decision there and then with the nurse, with, you know, a lot of tears and over a cup of tea, while Peter sort of came to, and they were holding they were sort of waiting for him at the radiotherapy area. You know, I thought, no, it suddenly dawned on me what was really important. And whilst all these families were immensely important, Peter was my husband and the person I loved, and so he was the person that I needed to be with at that time. So I did actually take some time out. I took some time off, and then I didn't go back.
Right.
And that, so it was a huge.
That is so interesting, Jane. So you're full on head teacher. You know, I can imagine everything you've ever worked for, and then this happens. And so what went on in your head then to think, I'm going to live? Why did you want to leave that at that point?
I didn't want to. Circumstances were that Peter was ill for quite some time. And, you know, he lost 3 stone in 6 weeks. He lost his voice. At one point, he was hospitalized with sepsis at one point. We had to face the fact that he may not get through this time. And I drew on all my strategies, all my resources, and I was very strong. And Peter, who'd been very strong and had always had often been there for me when I was going through dark or difficult times in the past, he was just not able to
So your kind of rock wasn't there anymore?
my rock, and Peter
Yeah,
means rock, doesn't it? And he was not there, and I felt
yeah,
very alone, and I felt
yeah.
like I was losing him,
Mm.
and um,
It's scary, isn't it?
it was very scary. But I kind of went through it. It's interesting, isn't it? When you have a crisis, sometimes you just get through it, and then afterwards you fall apart. And
Yeah,
a little bit what happened to me.
yeah.
So, and it wasn't helped by my menopause journey. And as we know,
Right.
as I know now,
Right,
that
so the M word. So you're going through all this,
yeah,
and then the menopause comes in the middle of it.
yes.
Yeah,
So I was going through this with Peter.
yeah,
He did get better.
yeah,
He did go back to work. And I thought, right, what am I going to do now? And I suppose I'd come to that point in my life where I thought, I felt new opportunities, this created an opportunity for me. What do I want to do now? Do I want to go back to work? And I did want to go back to work, and I did want to be in education still. But I also wanted to have more time with Peter. We had, been through this awful time. We decided we wanted to spend more time traveling and exploring and trying new things. And I think we were just grateful for every day that we
yeah.
had.
Did
So I
it change your perception? Because I so relate to this, that when something like that happens, it does make, it's almost kind of the spectre of death almost kind of comes just into your sight, and it makes you really realize how precious time is, and
absolutely,
so what am I going to do with my time now?
absolutely. And I wasn't even the one going through the
Yeah.
cancer,
Mm.
but I had become a carer
Yeah.
of somebody who was going through cancer.
Mm.
And whilst I wasn't in Peter's club,
Yeah.
he wasn't in my club. And so we had this, which did create some issues for us moving forward.
Mm.
But and I think we've spent the last few years sort of moving through that time and moving forward and finding ways how to accept and move forward from the huge changes that presented.
Yeah.
We did go traveling. We went to Patagonia. We climbed mountains. We did wonderful things. And that's a whole other podcast, isn't it? But that was wonderful. And then, and I did set up a consultancy, an education consultancy, and I was back working and supporting schools. And I'm a trained coach, so I was coaching individuals, I was coaching teams and staff, and working in schools that were challenging or were in challenging situations. So I did all that, but fairly swiftly, I felt, that the menopause symptoms
Yeah.
were
Mm.
were creating barriers for me, were interrupting what I wanted to do.
In
And
what way?
I had things,
Mm.
sorry, Debbie, I had things like, I was very angry. I was angry about what happened,
Yeah.
but I think it was exacerbated by my symptoms. Stress was also making things a lot worse for me. So I had symptoms, the hot flush, the night sweats. I had insomnia. I was very, very angry, as I said, and
I
I
think
had
anger is really interesting. You don't, it's like, as a woman, it's sometimes not an acceptable emotion, isn't it? But I certainly found there was a lot of anger around illness, around kind of, whoever it is up there could do this to me.
yes, yeah.
Is yeah, and I think it's so healthy to admit that.
I think so, and I
Mm.
think, but at the time I didn't. So now looking back, I feel
Yeah,
in a really good place now that I can look back and think, gosh,
yeah,
good. And Peter was angry too.
yeah,
He
yeah,
was angry about this illness, and neither of us were expecting to retire and put our slippers on. That wasn't in our plan.
yeah.
We wanted to travel. We wanted to open schools abroad. We wanted to do all sorts of things. So yes, and we had to. So all that was going on,
Yeah.
and then perimenopause, and
Mm.
the symptoms had been rumbling for a while, but now they were overwhelming.
Mm.
So I started to look for support and help and information, and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the information. I mean, it's only 4 and a bit years ago I'm talking
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
and things have really changed in the last 4 years. There's a huge movement now, as you know, but
The major companies, aren't they? Diageo I was looking at, have really taken this seriously now. It seems a real sea change around.
yeah,
And
thank goodness,
workplace.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
And so I felt angry about that as well. I felt angry that you think you go through so many hormonal changes as a woman,
Yeah.
but there seem to be so many barriers to moving forward, and
Mm.
I've overcome many, and I was like, oh, for goodness sake, now this.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous, and I found it hard to believe
Mm.
that we're here in sort of, it was what, 2016. It was like,
Yeah. Why weren't we warned about this? Yeah.
we know why things have
And
changed.
informed as well, not just to see it as some scary thing, but informed, and what choices can we make about this? And
as an educationist, I was thinking this should be on the curriculum.
yes,
Why
yeah,
aren't we teaching?
yeah.
We aren't teaching young girls, young women about this, young adults about this.
Yeah.
So in terms of the life cycle of a woman, we're very good at the life cycle of a frog, but we don't actually talk about the life cycle of a woman. It's like, and I think that there was it just became this taboo subject, didn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, after all this sort of
Mm.
researching, and I loved researching, and
Yeah.
love research anyway, and finding out. So I thought, this is ridiculous. I need to use the skills that I have from being a teacher, a leader, and transfer that, and look at what can I do to help myself
Mm.
and to help other women who find themselves in this situation.
Sorry, Jack, I was just
And,
really
and yeah.
interested that you were saying about earlier, because I didn't know that you coach women to find their voice. And so do you think that at menopause that women start to lose their voice because they might have created a particular persona that has given them some confidence, and then this menopause time then can erode that? Is it, or do you think it's just completely individual and
I don't know.
depends on?
There's a lot in that. Some women have said to me that they feel invisible at this time.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon to hear that.
Yeah.
They don't feel they're taken seriously.
Mm.
And we hear that with handpicked menopause in the workplace, and in the training. Women in the workplace, worry about how they're being perceived in the workplace. And there might be incredibly, professional women who have a lot of wisdom and a lot of skills, but actually suddenly they it depends how they're affected. If their cognition is affected, then they may be concerned about, I might forget that, or I might be. So it's about putting that support in place so that actually they can continue in that role.
Yeah.
But when I coach individual women, through H1, through hot women menopause, some women do say to me that they've hidden a lot of their feelings for a long time. Yeah. They did feel they just had to put up with it and get on with it. And these are professional women and women who have chosen perhaps to stay at home. So all sorts of different types of women, different life choices. And different experiences, and also some women who just feel, oh well, it's a time I need to get through. And some women who couldn't take our HRT, who tried different routes but didn't work, in the end gave up.
Yeah.
I'm not one for giving up, and I think that, I mean, this we've talked before, Debbie, about growth mindsets and fixed mindsets, haven't we? And I think that, if you have a growth mindset as a woman going through a challenging time with hormonal imbalance and menopause, I think, then you look for solutions.
Yeah.
But I do speak to women who haven't got that, who have a very fixed idea about how people perceive them.
Can we just touch on a growth mindset, because this is a concept that we're very familiar with, but I probably only came up against it probably about 5 years ago with Carol Dweck's work around, and this whole idea that if you have a child who is, because you're not labeling a child very young to say you're good at this and you're not good at this, but actually allowing somebody to keep kind of exploring, changing at every single period of their life. And I found this massively, because it was something I think I definitely had inherently. I don't know why, but at every stage of my life, I thought, right, okay, what's now? What can I do now? And I think I'll do a bit of this and a bit of that. And I think for me, it was the absolute kind of foundations of resilience for me to be able to deal with some of the things I've dealt with in my life, for being adaptable. But I don't think people appreciate that, how important that is for good mental health. And also maybe how you can, if you haven't got it, or you think, you know, you have become too fixed, how you can change it. So what advice would you give for women?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, my experience in teaching and leading in teaching,
Yeah,
taught me that, you know, didn't whatever a child's background is, whether, you know, whether they were being affected um, through being disadvantaged, like their social or economic background. That, yes, that was a barrier to learning, and you had to find interventions a way through that. But very often a child could arrive, whatever background, whatever situation they were coming from, arrive at school with a very open mind, with that growth mindset, and self-belief, and an understanding that actually, you know, I can develop my talents. I know I can do that. I want to learn. And
yeah,
other children, you know, from all sorts of different types of backgrounds, could come with a closed mindset, a fixed mindset, very fixed about what they could do. Now, very young children, I can
yeah,
remember children who didn't want to try things, didn't want to learn new things because they were terrified of failing.
yeah,
And Barry Heimer, who education's a bit of a guru, who follows Carol Dweck's work,
yeah.
he's got the acronym he uses with the word FAIL, which is first attempt in learning. And I love that. And it was
So good.
and I think, you know, children were afraid of failing, and it was about. So I think that there are similarities between, you know, the children I've worked with and the women and the adults that I'm coaching now, and I think that it's yes, you can teach. As a leader, you need to have a growth mindset.
Yeah,
Whatever you're doing, whether a leader in your own life or a leader of other people, you need to have a growth mindset, and you need to believe that you can grow other people, you can grow that growth mindset, and help them to see that.
mm,
I think I'd say that it's about the culture, and I think, you know,
yeah,
there's a lot we could talk about society, but just thinking about you know, our changing culture
mm,
for women at menopause, for example, and it is changing and it is better, but there's still a lot of work to do. So I think making sure that women, not making sure, but allowing, enabling women to
yeah,
see that there are solutions, there are opportunities, and, you know, that they can develop this growth mindset, a different way of thinking, a new way of thinking. They may be in a situation at that time of life which, you know, could be compounding their menopausal symptoms. It could be a situation they want to change, but
mm,
they don't see how they can change it
mm,
because of their fixed mindset. Because whilst we work hard with children, sometimes those fixed mindsets prevail.
mm.
So, you know, as adults, we do have a lot of adults with a very fixed mindset.
Yeah.
Um,
And I can't think of, I mean, it's just one reason why Erica and I set up Rock My Age was that we kind of looked around and thought, actually, you know, we're mid-50s, but we're full of energy. We want to be completely involved in stuff, got lots of skills. And we looked around and thought, there's nothing really, you know, I didn't find a magazine that inspired me particularly. I didn't find a group, some kind of platform or whatever to really kind of find like-minded people to explore these ideas. And I think there's possibly, and also I think we look at, you know, our mothers at this age, it was first so different, wasn't it, to have kind of born in the 60s. It was such a different trajectory. And Eric and I have often talked about, we feel like we're kind of almost like pioneering to what this age can look like. I know there are old, you know, lots of people like Judi Dench and Helen Mirren who are kind of setting a different kind of idea of an older woman, but
I think we're all part of this movement, aren't we? And some of us, you know,
yeah,
are celebrities, and some of us are just, you know, people like me, just ordinary people who, studied, interested in education,
Yeah,
I've always wanted to support, I have those values of community and relationships. And I
yeah.
think that, I just feel that I can't sit on my hands and say, oh, I hope things get better for women. I said this to my husband this morning. I've got to keep moving. I've got to keep doing things and
Yeah,
finding ways of supporting and sharing what's worked for me,
yeah,
um, and what other and other people, and getting people, facilitating other women to come together and
yeah,
support one another.
yeah.
There's a really lovely exercise that I used to do every holiday at school, term time,
Mhm.
6 weeks, you'd be absolutely exhausted. And then the first thing I would do was the Wheel of Life exercise. You probably know it, Debbie,
Yeah.
And I think it's a lovely analogy
So
because
explain it, because
yeah, so
yeah,
it's about, you've got the spokes of the wheel and you can choose what that content might be. It could
yeah,
be finance, it could be well-being, it could be spirituality, it could be exercise, it could be friendships. And you score yourself on those
yeah,
spokes, well, 0 to 10, don't you? And then um so you might, and then you join the dots. So you might have a very lovely smooth circle, but perhaps you've scored 3 on each of those in each of those areas. So you've got a very small wheel, but it's very small. When you win, or you might have scored 6 in relationships and 2 in spirituality and 5 in exercise. So you've got a very bumpy wheel. And we know that, if you go through life and, if you're on a journey and you've got a bumpy wheel, it's not going to be very comfortable. And you're going to have lots
yeah,
of pressures on the way.
yeah,
If you go through life and you've got you're on a journey rather, and you've got a small wheel, it's going
yeah.
to take a long time to achieve what you want to achieve. So if you score highly and it's nice and even, you've got a large wheel, you're going to get where you want. It's going to be a nice journey.
And
And I
there are
love
great
analogy.
visual, kind of simple visual idea. I look at that as well, kind of just checking in with yourself, kind of, am I fulfilling my needs in all of these areas? So I can kind of, be the best kind of, I don't know, mother, wife, partner, all those kind of things, friends, doing something purposeful. Because it is that if you're not looking after yourself properly, how can you do all these other
Oh,
things?
absolutely. You can't pour from an empty cup, can you?
Yeah,
And I think, as a teacher, as a head teacher particularly, I was, often near
oh,
burnout.
yeah,
So that for me, I got myself a coach when I was ahead, and that wheel of life really helped. And I keep it on, pin it up on the inside of my wardrobe. So every time I opened it was there, and I
yeah.
thought, oh,
I do too.
so
Yeah,
well there.
yeah,
But
yeah,
and I think women find that really helpful. It's a good starting point, it's a good coaching tool. And I think that starts to open up opportunities and possibilities and helps to grow that mindset.
yeah,
So I think, saying to women that, that there are solutions, there are ways,
mm,
there is a balance, it's finding time for yourself.
mm,
Oh, I haven't got time. No, you carve out time. And we're all busy and we all have busy lives. And a lot of women have a huge challenges in their lives. I understand that, but I
mm,
think we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the people that we love to and we work with to
mm,
take that time to be the best we can
yeah.
be.
So just
So
on that voice, on raising a woman's voice, because this is something that Eric and I are very passionate about, and get a lot of letters and comments from people, from 50 upwards, saying that they, exactly what you've already pinpointed, is that they don't feel they fit in at work anymore. They don't feel, they because they're not at childbearing age anymore, they feel they've kind of lost that identity. And I mean, it's something that just drives me crazy, because I see these fantastic, beautiful, and not beautiful in the way we were at 25, but still kind of beautiful, vibrant women who then dial everything down because they think they don't fit. And so what advice would you give to somebody like that?
or they feel that that's what's expected of them in society,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Mm.
What advice would I give? I think, I think that it's very difficult to give advice. So I think of children, it's about creating the right environment for people.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that has to come first.
Mm.
That the right environment, an enabling environment,
Yeah.
a culture where women feel comfortable,
Mm.
and then you can build on that. And I think that's why I feel so passionate about what I do, whether it's working with the handpicked team, or coaching women individually, or writing as I do, and podcasts as I do, because I feel that that is working in some small way, contributing to this movement, which will change that culture and create that enabling environment for women and young.
And actually, and women can come to those platforms, can't they? Fantastic work that Hemppick does, and
It's so important.
That's great, Jane. Thanks so much. We've run out of time, but just a couple of questions for you. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Nothing is personal.
Brilliant. That's great. I love that. And what is the best thing about being the age you're in now?
Oh gosh, all the mistakes that I've made, I've learnt from. When I look into my little toolkit of strategies, as I call it, and I see all the mistakes and challenges that I've been through, that I've learnt from. They've all taught me something. The most challenging times, the most challenging people, the most challenging children are the ones who've given me, who've taught me the best lessons, and I've learnt from the most. So I think that, I would say, yes.
And what would you like to be remembered for?
What would I like to be remembered for? Oh gosh, I think reducing barriers.
Right, lovely. Yeah.
Reducing barriers for women. So that they can achieve what they set out to achieve.
Fantastic. Jane, thank you so much for being my guest this afternoon. It's been such fun talking to you, and hopefully there's been some useful tips for women out there. And just remind us of your coaching company again. It's
Hot Women at Menopause.
Hot Women at Menopause, fantastic. And you also work with the wonderful Hempick team as well. So just a shout out to them as well.